Booyakasha! Big up the whole Kingston town. You ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Welcome to Casual Academy MMA. Join us as we dive deep into mixed martial arts history for every UFC, WEC, Pride, and Strikeforce event. We'll examine the fights and fighters of the past, reviewing the eras, techniques, and revolutions that made our beloved sport the phenomenon it is today. Without further ado, let's watch the fights.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Casual Academy. My name is Nathan Karimi, and I'm joined, as always, by my cousin and co-host.
What's up, guys? I'm Kevin Zimbelman.
Tonight, we made it, baby. UFC 10.
Hell yeah.
This is where the big boys come to play. The Ultimate Fighting Championship. And this is their playpen, the Octagon. Home to the toughest, most intense hand-to-hand combat ever. Yes, it's UFC 10, the tournament.
10 events under our belt. Casual Academy is going strong. If you have not subscribed and you want the number one source for MMA history, fight by fight, event by event, please join us. Subscribe at our YouTube page, Casual Academy MMA, and on all social channels, Casual Academy. I'm pumped up because this event kicked ass. We've made it to 10, big milestone, a lot going on. If you joined us last time for a rather uneventful event, UFC 9, you will remember that they got rid of the tournament style. We were sitting here trying to think who won. No one really won because there was a super fight, which Dan Severn defeated Ken Shamrock. And I guess the big event was that Don Frye remained undefeated 4-0 by defeating Bauchich.
Yeah, Bachech.
Yeah. UFC 10, on the other hand, a lot to dig into. We promised you guys that we were going to do our pound for pound, so our next episode is going to be that. But for now, let's dig in, man. What were your initial thoughts on UFC 10?
UFC 10 was awesome. I really liked it. I mean, it started good just right off the bat. We saw Bruce Buffer. That was pretty cool.
His dog was killed in an accident, and he used that to motivate himself.
All right, we're set for the formal introductions, and right now let's go to Bruce Buffer.
SCG Sports Corporation welcomes you to the State Fair Arena in Birmingham, Alabama, for the greatest martial arts competition in the world.
Yeah.
We were promised a super fight between Hoist and Dan Severn, but that didn't come about.
Not really promised.
Yeah, you're right. Not promised, but it was alluded in UFC 9. You know, I thought they were going to make that fight, but it didn't happen. But all in all, still a great card.
Yeah, for sure. Tank Abbott was on the microphone, gave us a little context. If you guys remember, there was a brawl in Puerto Rico. Well, apparently it was Tank Abbott who was running the brawl, and he kind of explained that away, which is why we haven't seen him in a few fights. He was on one. He admitted that he was having a few cocktails, but my God, he
was so annoying.
I think it's hilarious.
He was so annoying.
Yeah.
All right, so fight number one, we have Mark Hall versus Don Frye. Don Frye is also undefeated to this point, as well as being UFC 8 champion. So Mark Hall throws like a spinning back kick, but Don just like ate it, slammed Hall down, immediately gets in the half guard, and he starts throwing these punches to his rib cage. I mean, over and over and over and over. Like, you know how a body kick shows like the welt on your ribs? You could see the knuckles of Dan imprinted into this guy's rib. And that's it, pretty much. He just landed headbutts and punches to the rib cage, and John McCarthy stopped the fight.
Now, this did go on for like 10 minutes, damn near. And I remember thinking, like, it's not that this was the most brutal ground and pound, but I felt like it was the meanest. Like just no regard. He was, his ribs looked terrible. It was not a fight. I mean, it wasn't boring because he was active the whole time, but you realize Don Frye can be mean.
Oh, yeah.
Not a ton to this fight. Just Don Frye looking impressive again. So
Classic Don. Fight number 2, we have Scotty Fielder versus Brian Johnston. Scotty Fielder is a Missouri boy.
yep,
He's
Pacific, Missouri.
Shout out. So this fight was really even on paper, but it was kind of one-sided, I'd say, in the fight. So Johnston hits a judo throw, and then Fielder gets right back up. Then Johnston goes for the second judo throw the same way, but then Fielder like smartly took his back, tried setting up a rear naked choke, but didn't really get like his hooks in all the way.
Yeah,
But
he did eventually, but he just didn't. He never tightened anything up.
Yeah. And then eventually Johnston rolls out, lands on top, and then Fielder gives up his back, and then Johnston throws a couple hard shots and McCarthy stopped it.
Yeah. Dude, that was a little bit of a theme of tonight, which I noticed you put in the notes that John McCarthy did a good job of explaining it, but he did stop several fights early.
Agreed. And he never did that before. He did it in this event for some reason.
Yeah, it's almost like because since UFC 8, guys are legitimately getting better, bigger, stronger. The punches probably seem like they hurt real bad there. It wasn't like Brian Johnson continued that domination. Like when he did that first judo throw, I was like, oh, he is 1,000 times better than this dude. But he was just better. It's not like he was 1,000 times better. Kind of interesting fight just because you're not seeing a lot of these.
You're not seeing a lot of back takes. I was shocked how aggressive Scotty Fielder went for the back take and then transitioned to the rear naked choke. It looked a little modern. But
yeah, dude, it did. But him himself did not look modern.
No.
Like Brian Johnson kind of did. Brian Johnson was like, oh, this is this new era. They're actually athletes. They're in shape. They got six packs. Scotty Fielder looks like he looks like one of fucking Harold Howard's boys.
Yeah, shout out Harold Howard.
So nothing remarkable with that fight. Neither guy's mega memorable.
But this one was. Fight number 3, we have the introduction of Mark Coleman.
Yeah.
And he's going up against Hoti Morenstein. Mark Coleman, he's 31.
Backwards. Moti Horenstein.
Oh, yeah.
You said Hoti
Morenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Moti
Horenstein. Yeah.
That's funny. 6'2" with a survival fighting style.
Which is like his Israeli military training.
Yeah.
And maybe it's actually called survival and lost in translation. It sounds weird. But yeah.
Yeah, but man, Coleman is intense, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately plays no games, gets the takedown, gets up in mount, lands huge shots. And like Coleman is dropping bombs on this guy, and this is like 1 minute into the fight. He's taking some damage.
Big time.
Coleman eventually postures up even more, lands a few bigger shots, and McCarthy stopped it.
Don Frye was like, okay, he's well-rounded. He's got decent takedown defense. He's a good wrestler. He's got good hands. He's powerful. He's got heart. The whole package. Mark Coleman felt like all of that turned up.
Yeah, Coleman beat the shit out of this guy, and it was stopped in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So
good stoppage, if I remember correctly.
Agreed.
That was not one of the bad stoppages.
Yeah. Fight number 4, we have Gary Goodridge versus John Campatella.
Yeah.
Gary Goodridge, we've seen him a couple times before. I think he's 2-2 at this point, but he faced some big competition.
And he's always kind of in and around the finals.
Yeah.
Or not finals, like semifinals, quarterfinals, whatever. He's someone to reckon with at this point. At least. Yeah.
Yeah. And John Campatella's 27.
But he was jacked.
Yeah, he was jacked.
Jacked.
Yeah. So, I mean, Campatella immediately pushed the pace against Gary and pushed him right up against the cage, landed some big shots, and I feel like Gary almost pulled him down into the guard because he couldn't get away from this guy.
Yeah.
And then once Gary, I guess, got his bearings on him after John just aggressively pursued him, ended up getting advantage position on the top, landed a few big shots, and then John stopped this one so early, in my opinion.
Later on, he explained it, and when we were looking at the replay, we were like, was that a tap? And we concluded that it was not, but John said that it was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actually, I'm glad that they did this referee interview. I wish they would do this every UFC because it did explain a lot. It gave us John's mindset, not just about this UFC, but all of them. He admitted that he's starting to get scared of these dudes. Probably a little tongue in cheek there, but
I do think he was stopping earlier, like the quarterfinals, a little bit earlier than the semifinals.
Yeah.
I feel like in the semifinals, he let them like go on a little longer.
yeah, especially with some of the tougher guys. Dude, one thing about this fight here is like, so as a fight fan, Gary Goodridge isn't quite a Tank Abbott or like a Rampage Jackson, but if you're a fight fan, you've heard of Gary Big Daddy Goodridge at some point in some way, even if it's just from those brutal elbows. I've never heard of John Campatella.
No.
It's not like Gary Goodridge was 1,000 times better than John Campatella, but we talked about this and we're starting to see he's just got that little bit more.
Yes.
Where he's kind of etched into the history books, whereas John Campatella couldn't quite catch up to that curve and is not in the history books that I know of.
Yeah, same here. I do feel like these guys they separate themselves from the rest of the competitors, whether it's like their heart or, just how much damage they can take. And that little bit of give, right.
Yeah.
And that little bit of that separation, that gap, I mean, it shows.
It shows, and there's a reason for it. So I'm glad Gary Goodridge didn't lose this one because he seems to only lose to elite guys, or at the time, elite guys. So cool.
So that takes us to our first semifinal, where we have Don Frye going up against Brian Johnston.
Yeah, this was badass.
This was a really fun fight, man. And in the beginning of the fight, Don usually leads with his hands.
Yeah.
But I honestly feel like Johnston was getting the better of him on the feet.
Yeah, well, dude, if you remember, though, Don, before throwing a single punch, shot a takedown.
Yeah, he did.
Didn't get it, but shot it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, Don normally does most of his damage in the clinch, right? Well, he'll, like, put you up against the fence and do some uppercuts, knees. But Johnston was doing more in the clinch, and I feel like Don couldn't get, like, his normal shots off that he normally does.
You know, it's funny. This was that perfect example of Don Frye just having that X factor that Brian Johnston, who did not continue the test of time, did not.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like Brian Johnston, like, skill for skill, fresh, might even be better than Don Frye. But Don Frye just came through, outgritted him, outhearted him, and ended up winning with what, ground and pound?
Yeah. So Don made a pretty good adjustment. After he was getting like kneed a lot in the clinch, I noticed the next time he grabbed the clinch, he went for a sweep. And Brian Johnston didn't really see that coming. And then once Don gets top control, he's very aggressive.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of damage. And so, he could accumulate that damage really fast. And I guess, did he tap out? I think Brian Johnson getting tapped out to strikes.
Yeah, I think he did. I think I remember Brian Johnson tapping out, because we were like, yeah, Don would not have done that.
Right.
Yeah. And we fucking...
And Don is on his way to the finals. And now we're on to semifinal number 2, and we got Mark Coleman going up against Gary Goodridge.
Gary charges. Bad freaking idea because, like, Mark Coleman is an incredible wrestler, hits these fucking blast doubles, takes him down, gets into his guard, which is fine. The guard has kind of proven to be a safe place. Mark Coleman challenges that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark Coleman, like you've heard before that he's like the grandfather of ground and pound or the grandfather of headbutts or whatever. He's not the first guy to do these things, but he definitely took it to the next level. His style is simple. It is get into the guard, pass if you can, and absolutely smash. Gary eventually does get to his knees somehow. I mean, he's got some skill. We've talked about that he's a fighter. And he gets against the fence. This was the strangest thing because at one point Gary is climbing. His feet are on the ground, but he's grabbing the fence and he's walking while Don's holding him from behind. While Mark is holding him from behind, Gary Goodridge is walking, and you find out that he's trying to walk to get in front of his corner. Very weird because Don just lets him. Mark Coleman lets him. The camera then goes outside where you are like intimately in his corner, and you realize his corner has no clue what to tell him.
They're trying to tell him to throw elbows.
And that's it. And he never did it, not once.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mark Coleman is behind him throwing uppercuts. So imagine that you're facing this way. You don't know what's going on behind you. You're having a full-on conversation with a dude in front of you. And from behind, on both sides, a dude is uppercutting you in the chin. He realized he's not going to take Gary Goodridge down because Gary Goodridge is holding onto the fence. So he ends up walking backwards and forcing Gary to come and meet him in the middle of the octagon. From there, he threw a few punches, looked pretty good, takes Gary down, flattens him out, ground and pounds. Gary turns to his belly, and right as Don kind of gets that grapevine, right as Mark Coleman kind of gets that grapevine in, Gary's just like,
he didn't want no problems.
He didn't want anything there. Mark Coleman was absolutely exhausted, but dude, let me tell you something. This is when you realize that big and strong means nothing when someone is skilled. That said, Mark Coleman is super big and super strong, and he's absolutely definitively, I would put everything on the fact that he's on some intense steroids.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And also he has, like, he kind of pushes through, but his cardio is terrible.
Yeah. But he pushes through, man.
He does, he sure does.
One really funny moment of this fight is Coleman is in Gary's like full guard, and then he postures up, and you think he's gonna drop like a bomb of a right hand or something. I mean, he postures up and then just drops his head on him, dude.
Yeah, dude.
I've never seen that before. It was crazy.
Yeah, we have to. Yeah, well, holy shit, that headbutt was.
It was so powerful.
It was like the haymaker equivalent of a headbutt.
All right, and now on to the finals. We have Don Frye, undefeated at this point, going against Mark Coleman, who kind of just brawled his way through everybody. And we were like really anticipating this finals. I don't remember having this big of an anticipation for a finals because we got like star versus star in a way.
Remember, both of these guys fought in the semifinals. Mark Coleman fought shorter, but more recently. Don Frye fought longer, but had a little bit more of a rest time. Neither one of them were recovered when it comes into this fight. Immediately, they come to the center. They're kind of feeling each other out for just a second. Mark Coleman shoots a beautiful takedown. Don Frye sprawls really nice. Now, this is where that difference in wrestling separates itself, because Mark Coleman kind of throws Don Frye's arm and then ends up putting him kind of on his back and then continuing his ground and pound. This fight basically, honestly, rather than remembering all the details, I'm just going to paint the picture that Mark Coleman lands a takedown, brutal ground and pound. Don Frye tries to sprawl, tries to scramble, does get up at one, or no.
He does.
He does get up at one point. They kind of start throwing again. They're both exhausted. There is like a good 15-second moment in here where they both agree like, hey man, adjust your shoes. Okay, I'll adjust mine. They're just not trying to fight for a minute, which who could blame them? They just fought brutal big dudes for like 2-3 other fights before this. Don tries to throw. Mark shoots a takedown. Mark gets into his guard, ground and pound. John McCarthy stands it up just to see what's going on, checks the corner.
He was bigger, he was stronger, and he was more well-versed in the ground, in my opinion. You combine all those things, you're going to have a long night against Mark Coleman.
It's just too much. It's just too much.
I mean, to put it in perspective, this fight lasted 10, 11 minutes. By like 6 minutes into the fight, Mark Coleman already tried a bulldog choke against Don. He kneed him in the face on the ground. He headbutted him, and he landed some big bombs, big ground and pound. I mean, Mark Coleman is absolutely relentless, bro.
He's busy. That's such a good word. He's relentless. He's relentless and he's busy, dude, whether it's against the fence, whether it's in the middle. And it's almost like he doesn't need that cardio because he can just control. He is the king of control. He won this fight. He looked great. I think a lot of guys are going to struggle with him. I will say this, as it gets more modern, it's obvious that if you stuff the takedown, he has cardio issues.
Yeah.
I think this is where you also realize weight classes need to be in.
Absolutely.
Don Frye's a middleweight. I mean, I don't care. People can say that he's a heavyweight. He probably put on a lot of weight with steroids. He's 214 here. I know that's like not a middleweight, but dude, he's a fucking middleweight.
Yeah, he looks small. But I do think that last fight took a lot out of Don.
For sure. And that's another thing we said is if these guys were fresh, what would this have looked like?
Yeah. And man, you were talking about how, I think about 2 events ago, you said, first we're in the jiu-jitsu with Hoist.
Yeah.
And now I forgot the guillotine era. And
Yeah.
then you're like, your wrestlers are going to counter this.
Oh, you're so right. I know where you're going.
Now we're in the ground and pound era.
Absolutely. That guard is irrelevant.
Yes.
Dudes you've heard this before. Oh, he's posturing up. Dudes are posturing up. They're basing out so that they're not really, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of arm bars. We know this sport goes and moves, but you're right. This is the ground and pound era.
Yes. And honestly, Don kind of did that too. He didn't try to do stuff on the feet a lot. He tried to get takedowns and ground and pound, which is a little diversion from his style of on the feet in his prior ones.
Dude, which is really interesting because as we enter this, again, we'll do more of this in the pound for pound thing. As we enter this, we got to say, hey, Mark Coleman's a ground and pound guy. Hey, Dan Severn's a ground and pound guy. Who does it better?
All right, UFC 10 awards.
Yeah.
The only thing that really sticks out to me personally is fight of the night, and I think it's Don Frye versus Brian Johnston.
I love that fight because it didn't feel like either guy was too exhausted. Brian Johnston looked like a real martial artist. He was hitting crazy judo throws on, albeit an unknown dude, but the dude clearly had heart. He's hitting judo throws. He's got punches. His stand-up looks good. He looks tremendous. Don Frye kind of came and outworked him, and it was he worked for it. I agree. I agree with this as the fight of the night.
Knockout of the night? I mean, there was none.
Yeah, there was no official knockout. I think we're going to have to start including TKOs into the knockout of the night.
Both of these, knockout of the night and submission of the night, were just stopped early with John McCarthy stopping every fight early.
Was there a submission?
No. And this card was awesome.
I think we're entering that era where it's there are going to be no more easy fights for anybody.
Oh, that's a cool take.
Within a few cards, there's not going to be any more dudes from Pacific. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cool. So that's kind of it on these fights here, guys. This has been UFC 10, episode 11 of Casual Academy. Thank you, guys. If you have joined us up until this point so far, thank you. If there's something that you want to see a little bit different, we hope for this show, not to just get better in audio, not to just get better in lighting, not to have cooler posters. We want this show to be your number one source for MMA history. We want to look at every single fight in order, and we want to be able to talk about it, be able to kind of tell the truth about these eras. Tell people are you remembering these fighters the way that they deserve to be remembered? How many false narratives were there? That's kind of our goal on this show. So if that's something that you like, if you're an MMA fan and you really want to look back at the history of the sport, please do join us. Do that by giving us a subscribe on our YouTube channel and check us out on our other social channels, all at Casual Academy MMA. But from me and Kevin, we got through UFC 10, guys. It has been a blast. Thank you so much for you guys that have joined along with us. And we'll see you next time at UFC. No, next time we're going to see you. We're going to bring you our pound for pound list of the first 10 UFC events. In the next 10, we're going to be getting into Pride and possibly not the WEC quite yet, but certainly Pride. So thank you guys for joining, and we will see you next time.
And we're almost at 100 subscribers. We're almost at 100,000 views total, and it's been awesome. So thank you guys so much, for giving us feedback, paying attention to the content. It really warms my heart to know that the shit we're creating is good and it's being received well from everybody. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Cool.
Peace.
Nice.